Well, good evening, everybody. It's Chris here from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. Tonight, I told you all yesterday that tonight we're going to have Jim McMurtry on live, and I made a mistake. It's actually tomorrow. However, I do have a recording of a speech he gave right here in Alberta, actually, just north of me up in Morningside. It was fantastic. It was the first time I've ever heard Jim speak, and it was very motivating. I really felt like we need to support this guy and share what he's telling us, and really think long and hard about the implications of it. Because as you're going to see, the things that him and Francis Widdowson and Dallas Brody of 1BC are saying and trying to scream from the rooftops have a very consequential outcome if people would just open their minds and listen. In the last little while, people haven't been super receptive to them. There's some videos floating around online of violent attacks they've had towards them, all sorts of things, people spitting on them, dumping water and stuff on their sound equipment, just horrendous things. And it's not because, they're not telling the truth. It's because people don't like what they're saying, because it conflicts with an emotional bias they've already created around this topic. And the topic is residential schools and what they were and what it means for Canada now. You'll see in the title of this live stream, I did some cultural appropriation there, and I used some Cree words. No, I don't speak any Cree. I don't know any Cree words. I used Translate to do it. So the title of this video is How the Lies May Destroy Canada and Why We Must Support Truth. And when I say support truth, I'm actually saying we must support truth tellers, those who are speaking the truth, even in the face of violent outbursts and cancel culture and all of those great things that people who speak the truth have to put up with. So that's what we're going to do tonight. I'm going to share this video that I took in Morningside, and I'm just going to pop this up on the stage again. So Jim McMurtry, he wrote this book called The Scarlet Lesson. And I would encourage you all to go on Amazon, buy a copy, and read it. I do have a copy of it. I left it at the Whistle Stop today. I got to go pick it up because I really got to try and read it by tomorrow. Because tomorrow at 8 p.m., we will have Jim on the podcast talking about the book, why he decided to continue speaking up even after it cost him his job, and all those types of things. So, there's Jim's book, and here I'll put it up real quick. I know how everybody loves QR codes now. If you scan that QR code, that will take you right to his Amazon page where you can buy a copy of his book. Please do. That's the best thing you can do to support people who are doing this type of work. Support them financially through, buying their writing and stuff like that, and also attend events, share information, talk to people, have the difficult conversations, and all those good things that go along with it. So you don't need to be staring at my face any longer, I don't think. So I'm going to.
First of all, thank you for being here.
There he is, right there.
I never imagined
just a few days
it was
ago.
almost 5
And
years
please
ago
post in
now,
the comments if there's any sound
when I
problems
was
or
locked
anything.
out in
I'll
front of
do
my
it as
students,
best I can.
that anything good was going to come from that. And at the same time, my wife was dealing with stage 4 cancer, incurable cancer. So all of a sudden, we found both of us that we were out of work, and then I was a big disgrace, including to my wife. Wasn't, it took her a little bit of time for her to accept that, I didn't do anything wrong, because it was just hard for us financially. And I, so, and again, I just hope and certainly believe people do appreciate that it's not easy losing your job. So here I am, here's my leader, and there's a really nice man in the back, Chris Wyman, who said, Jim, there are people in Alberta that would like to hear from you. It's just sort of surreal for me that people would actually want to listen to me, because again, I was really crushed. And they walked me out in front of my students once before, so twice in front of my students. So it was suggested, I'm some sort of criminal or whatever. And so that begins my story, and there's certain pieces to it that you're going to see recur. There are a lot of literary allusions because I was an English teacher for a long time, and that's particularly important because I love books, and I'm not going to tell you what they're doing to good books in school. And I also want to, make reference to some exciting things that are happening in British Columbia. And so I know I'm in Alberta, but my story is, it's more acute really, and the problems I think are worse in British Columbia. And I know Alberta, by the way. I lived in Edmonton for 2 years, and one of my children lived here for a number of years. And so I've spent a lot of time here. I just love Alberta physically, and it was so wonderful driving here, except for the fact that there was a truck on fire and I was stopped for 2 hours yesterday. And I was an hour late for the first speaking engagement of my life. And so I know we came just at the last minute here, but I'm on time, so I'm feeling so relieved. So I've got, if any time you think that there's something really important to say, do say it. I will take some questions toward the end. I do understand, and again, this is being watched by other people as well, which is, again, tremendous, wonderful honor for me. I brought books to sell. I only have 5, and if you don't buy them, that's okay, because I only have 5 left. And I think, but I also have little leaflets to show you if you are interested in order, and a book on Amazon. Again, it's all part of the fact that I think my story actually is becoming important, and I don't think there's anything important about me. I was just a guy who was trying to stay in the teaching profession and dodging all the fastballs that are just thrown at your head all day long, because any kid at any time in that classroom can snitch on you, to a parent, to an administrator, to a colleague. I mean, at any time you can, be carried away. And for me to be removed the second time was even worse than the first time, which I'm not going to go into, for saying something that is true. And just quickly about residential schools. I study residential schools. That's one of the few things I know about. And when they're saying in Kamloops, where we were a few days ago with Alice Brody, who heads up this new party that's going to transform Canada called 1BC, playing on the idea that we're all Canadian, we all should have rights that are no more, no less than other Canadians. And Francis Whittleson, who is this incredibly determined professor, and they come into this, and they're inviting me to events and made me a 1BC candidate and done all these things for me because of what I did starting almost 5 years ago in fighting the original sin. So, as you know, in a biblical sense, there's this idea that there is original sin. And I don't want to talk about, Adam and Eve and the apple and all that sort of stuff. I just want, the conception here is that Canada was born in sin. And the sin is that we did not treat people who don't look like we look like, that we treated them badly. So I'm looking here and I'm seeing people with the same power that I have, probably the same ancestry, and you're all the enemy. And if you have children in schools, particularly where I was teaching, the kids would realize very quickly that you're the enemy. So when I was on the highway yesterday, trying to talk to Chris with his very poor reception, saying to him, the fire's still going on, there's no fire truck, and I'm so sorry. There was a man walking up and down, people out of their vehicles just walking up and down, and I met a guy, and we started talking, and then he had a boy with him, and the boy's name was Garrett, and And I said to, ask the questions, what are you doing? Well, I'm a high school student. Well, what do you want to do after that? And I said, well, I'd like to get a job, but there are no jobs because I'm a white guy. I mean, the things that some young people are saying right now are really, I think, rather disturbing. It's as though society is really wants a villain, really wants a devil, in opposition to what they are. So, what is at the heart of that original sin? And then there's lots of things. In schools, they just a litany of things that we have done terribly. Chinese head tax, and the Komagan route, the Sikhs on board, and the St. Louis, and on, all these different things. We had slavery, and all these bad things. And number one was how we treated our indigenous people. We stole their land, and just terrible things. And the one, and then bring it right to the present, the 60s scoop, which when I was a little bit younger, people would say, a lot of people adopted indigenous children because these kids didn't have the necessities of life. And I've met a number of people. I've met Cree, for example, who adopted an indigenous child. And people would just go, fantastic. And here you go, a few years later, and those people were the most wicked people in the world because they took away their culture. These kids wouldn't be alive if it weren't for the fact that they were non-Indigenous families willing to adopt these kids. So that takes me to the very heart of this trope of residential schools being bad, being wicked. Kids on hooks, kids put into incinerators, girls impregnated by priests. Queen Elizabeth apparently went to the Campbell's Indian Residential School in 1964, and with her husband, Prince Philip, kidnapped 10 children and disappeared and they were never seen again. There's so many stories about how bad residential schools are. And so imagine if I had said that day that residential schools were good. I wouldn't have dared say that. But I just couldn't accept what they were saying in Kamloops, that those kids were murdered by their teachers. Anyhow, it just seems so preposterous. 215, and some of them was 3, never saw a 3-year-old at school. They didn't start at age 7 at the residential school, and most ended a little bit later. So I know that. I can even tell you the name of the only 2 kids that died at the residential school. And I can tell you a lot of the names because this is an area of research for me. And good research. I was studying under Mark Carney, not keen on, but his father, who was a conservative, very principled man, was the leading expert on Indian residential schools and day schools up until recently when he passed. He was a remarkable man, and he helped me with my life. We were close. And then I went into PhD at the University of Toronto, so I do know what I'm talking about. The 2 kids that died at the school, one was, I'm sorry, I just want to apologize to Chris again. He had to listen to me speak yesterday. And if you want to get up and leave, I understand that. And if you want to throw things at me at any point, okay, and I'm young, I'm going to make this interesting for you, I promise. What's your name? Wyatt? Okay. Believe me, some things you're going to find interesting. Just let me get there. And so one of them was a boy named Adrian George, and he was playing a game of sort of cowboy Indians, and they refer to it as outlaw. But he was, they were pretending to hang somebody, and he was on the box playing with other kids, and somehow he slipped off the box, and the kids couldn't get him off the rope. And then there was a girl named Pearl Joe, and she was down by the river, so you all know Kamloops probably, but there's a fast-moving river right there, right where the residential school was, right on the ground, right around, and she drowned. Years later, they built a swimming pool, a big swimming pool in front of the residential school. And the motivation for doing so was they didn't want any other kids to drown. They realized that a lot of these kids didn't know how to swim. And so we're to believe that it was all wicked. And all the kids across Canada have been told that. And it really, of course, hit its peak hysteria over this Kamloops thing. So when I opened my, big dumb mouth, whatever, and said, well, the only, those who died while enrolled in residential schools did so from disease like tuberculosis and sometimes fires, accidents. Oh my gosh, within 20 minutes, I was walked out. I didn't know, I was asking, why? Two male vice principals are sent out to walk me out. And I packed myself up, and I didn't say anything to the students because, I like to things because it don't involve them, but I think I just didn't, I was just so hurt that I was being treated in this way. And so I walk downstairs and so forth. And I'm starting to get angry. They're not responding to me, they're just walking around the school. And I get down to the school and I turn to them and I said, I'm going to make this easier for you. I'm going to see the principal, I'm going to ask and find out what I did wrong. And they said, no, you can't do that. And I said, I'm going to make this easier for you. And they recognized that it was a good idea, and not that I wanted to be violent in the school, but my gosh, I knew it was all over for me. And it's over for me. I can never teach kids again. I knew I couldn't be walked out twice and never even would want to be a teacher again. I just couldn't believe this. I couldn't believe that the whole country became so committed to the idea that Christian men and women would go into residential schools to murder children. I just found it extraordinary. And then again, when you research it, and you go, these people did extraordinary things. Oh my gosh, when you're driving by the prairies last night, coming an hour late from a speaking engagement, it was so dark in places. How tough it must have been. A friend of mine said to me a while ago, he said that his great-great-grandfather, who settled in Manitoba, lost 2 children to wolves. I mean, when you just think of all the challenges of living in Canada, and men and women of the cloth come, many of them from Britain, and they come here to work with those kids to make this their life mission. And we're defaming the dead in this way. So I would say something I didn't have the guts to say, but I knew it when this happened to me. So I should say 4.5 years ago, to be precise. Residential schools were good. Residential schools in some cases were extraordinary. Many of these kids were beautifully served, and they went back to reunions to say that. Kamloops Indian Residential School, that they're presenting as a killing field, had a reunion in 1978, its last year of operation, and about 300 former students and teachers attended. So this is the problem. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is truth. Equity is not equity. Inclusion is exclusion. Diversity is university in the original sense of the word. I mean, everything is the opposite. Everything is the opposite. So when, and again, I'm not gonna, I will do a better job. Last night, I didn't know where my mind was. I was just so panicked because I was disappointed by coming late. But I'd love to bring you in to understand better why you're here, why I matter to you, and why there are people listening to hear it. So, I don't really know. I just want to tell you my story. And I think my story is kind of interesting. And anytime if there's something about anything that you need to say to me or whatever, please do so. But my story is interesting in part because because I'm Roy McMurtry's son. Now, most of you wouldn't know who Roy McMurtry is, but he was a big deal at one time. He was chair of the CFL Football League, Canada's ambassador, High Commissioner to Britain, Chief Justice of Ontario, Attorney General, Solicitor General. He had all these big roles. And I'm his kid. And I'm being fired. How does he was still alive? How do you think he handled that? And so I didn't have the guts. And you're going to see how I come back about the guts. I actually do have the guts. But it took a while. It took a while for me to understand who I was. And I'm the same person I was from being a little kid, but I didn't know that there was worth to it. I just thought that I was just the guy that was getting in trouble all the time and fired. So for 2 years with my father and my mother, they both passed around the same time. The first 2 years of this event, I talked to them every day. I talked to them every day for the last 5 years of their lives because I love my parents and I did what I could. I couldn't leave where I am because I live in the Vancouver area and I have soon to have 7 grandchildren and my child. I mean, couldn't leave and be back there, and my wife is sick. So I called for 2 years. They'd ask me how was school today, dear, most of the time. And I'd lie to them. I just didn't want to tell my parents, that this is, what I've done to the family name. So that's why I'm saying like I'm in here. It's quite something that people are here. And I felt that last night, and I was pretty bold in Kamloops, and there were over 1 million hits on my name just on Wednesday alone. So people are becoming interested in my story, and it's still hard for me again to feel that because I've gone from really that phoenix, from ashes. I was in a dark place, and as was my wife, understandably. So the conception of the original sin, you have to end the original sin. So Francis Whittleson in Dallas Brody said, Jim, come with us. Let's just put an end to it. And I said, I've done everything I possibly can for 4.5 years to try and show people there are no bodies there. And nobody cared, including nobody cared. I wrote to priests and ministers in Abbotsford, right across Canada. I said, I'm defending Christians. I wrote, of course, to the Ministry of Education. I wrote to the trustees. I wrote to tons of people, profs across Canada. I didn't get a single response, except for a small group of people in a clandestine organization called Lightfoot. And the interesting thing about them, that we've all managed to create our own little audiences and do something of value. But we were all in a dark place. One of them is named Chanel Fall, who's got a lot of followers in X. She was forced to resign as a teacher, age 30, because she couldn't handle anymore. And she also has a progressive disease. She's in pain all the time. But she's fighting back. But she didn't stay, she didn't fight in the school. She resigned and then she realized that bad thing. And then there's a woman named Carolyn Berjowski and James Pugh who started an online news platform called Watch Canada. We were a small group of people. We were all in one chat together on a few occasions. The most memorable one was a guy named Richard Bilkstow, who was defending Canada when he was at this happens in the school system. There was a black woman speaking to all the principals in Toronto and saying how terrible and how racist they all were and stuff like that, and how it's even worse in Canada with black racism in the United States. And he put up his hand and he defended Canada and became part of our group. And shortly after he committed suicide. So it's not easy when you're a principal and you feel, he was an high school principal, he was having a different relationship with the kids. It's not easy when they take everything away from you. So that's, I need to make this lighter in some ways, but so we need to address this. We need to say, we have to stop what's happening in schools. Now, I don't know why it is aware of all this sort of stuff. Do you have land acknowledgements at your school? You're okay, sorry. Okay. My school, we had already, yes?
My nephews in kindergarten last year, they had.
Okay, so we'll come time to converge. So I'm going to move to questions very soon. I'm going to say a couple of things. So this stuff divides families. So my family, I have 2 girls and a boy. And my girls right now are very upset with me, and they have been for years. I also feel very close to them, one in particular, and the other one, we have good and bad days with each other. But they know I love their children, and I'm always doing things with my grandchildren. So, I have a relationship that I think is a good relationship, but they're very upset with me because they're ambitious, and one wants to hold on to her job, and the other one wants to be a judge. All 3 of my kids happen to go into law, and their partners are all lawyers. So sometimes I'm sitting with the 6 of them right there, and they say, why is it that all the lawyers in BC take a course in which it says that the 215 bodies were found in Kamloops, and they're all children in a mass grave? Why is it that lawyers, young lawyers, still in 2025, are still taking this re-education course? And that's just the beginning of it. It's just, we're stolen land and all that kind of stuff. Why is it that lawyers don't fight this? And Chris and I were talking about this in the car up, and I yesterday in our presentation, I reduced it to courage. And having guts. I'm going to use the word guts today, and not courage, just so Chris gets some variety in my talk. But it's absolutely fascinating. And so tell me many times, just one-on-one conversation. And my 2 sons-in-law say to me, well, I can't say anything. And they said, well, how did you vote? Because all the lawyers had to vote whether they're going to change that course. And that's how Dallas Brody got kicked out of the Conservative Party in BC. Because she went to the support of the lawyer who actually said, we've got to change our education materials because we're lying to all the young lawyers. Oh, thanks. Very sweet. Very sweet. Thank you. But they said no, and I said to them, well, how did you vote? And they said, I didn't vote. But we had to vote, but we just said, so it was extraordinary. It was about 1/3 of the people that voted for, the third option of not decided or whatever it was. So and they said, well, why didn't you vote? It was anonymous. And we said, no, it's not. No, it's not. Because they can figure that out. There's tracks somewhere. They can tell who voted for what, and that could affect my career. And then my daughter-in-law said to me, well, she voted on my side. She's close to me. My son, her husband, is very powerful kind of presence of a person. He's bigger than I am and a lot angrier. I mean, he went through years of university where he couldn't open his mouth because he didn't want to get a bad mark, but he graduated in the end with 3 degrees, and he said that he's going to commit the rest of his life to ending public universities. So that's pretty sad again, and this is what they're running. This is how some are reacting. I asked my younger daughter, and she said she wasn't going to tell me. And then I asked my older daughter, and she said, it's none of my business, and Dad, I don't agree with anything you're doing. And I don't want to ever talk about this again with you. And I even said to her recently, I said, I'm going to meet the good people of Calgary and Red Deer, and it's really exciting for me, and I'm calling it a book tour. And, I have 6 books. But that's a good thing because it means that they're selling and I've ordered more. It's just, she didn't, I don't care about anything you're doing in that part of your existence. So families are divided. I have 5 siblings. I have one sister who's really supportive. And I have 4 who are very unhappy with me because they think they're hurting the family. And then I have some in-laws, 2 in particular three in particular are very woke. And I know they love me. I really, because I'm a good guy, I'm good with their kids and all that stuff. But they really disapprove of me. So I think you're going to be on my side in a second when I tell you what they're doing in schools, my questions. So I'm going to say there's the 6 things that I really started fighting against. 6 things. And I'll go really quickly unless you want me to give you. I mean, the first one is the sex stuff. I waited till Wyatt left the room. And when, there's nobody else that's going to, but I won't go into details. But if you're showing pictures, illustrations to kids as young as kindergarten of sexual acts, you know there's something wrong there. If you're taking kids at a really young age and you're asking them, they do it in all the schools still in BC, they ask kindergarten kids what their pronouns are and stuff. They want to know their sexuality. And then they're also grooming. You're not supposed to say grooming anymore. That there's all sorts of things that you're not supposed to say anymore in school. Because it's all very Orwellian. In 1984, they're getting rid of the old language. They call it old speak. And they're bringing in new language. And the new language, you know, new speak is reduced. And so there's all these words you can't say, the R word, the N word. But I mean, if you really wrote down all the words, you're getting rid of a lot of the English language. And some things are ridiculous. So if I said Indian, that's enough for me to be suspended as a teacher. But yet Indian is the word that's illegal. It was originally illegal. It's still the official word in the Indian Act and so forth. So anyhow, they just go crazy about all sorts of things. And I didn't want to lose my job, and I knew it was the minefield, but I just wasn't as successful as other people. And eventually, these are the 6 things I just, I was snitched on by kids, and parents got mad at me, and then the principal went crazy, and it all began one day when I gave a girl a Markov, and she's in my book, and it's kind of an interesting thing. I call her the Tempest, because she was wonderful most of the time, and then she had bad days. And she was, I don't know what her condition was, but she just had bad days, and all of a sudden, she loved me as the teacher, but all of a sudden she went to the principal and said, a terrible person, and then it was gone. She was the cause of all 3 of my investigations against me, one kid. And so be very careful. So the first thing they're doing is they're going into the sex stuff. And if you don't think this is bad, then and of course everybody here is agreeing with me, you really need to see it. So I went, after I was fired, I went into schools to see the drag queen performances. Because they had drag queens in a ton of schools where I was living in Surrey. I worked in Abbotsford, lived in Surrey. And they ended very quickly, because what I did is I walked around the parking lot asking the parents when it was about the time to pick the kids up. And they knew there were drag queens performing. And so things ended very quickly, but I mean, it got crazy. There are drag queens coming into kindergarten classes, bouncing little kids on their laps. This was autoerotic. This was stimulation for them. And we were bringing them into the school to do that with little kids. The next one I'm going to jump to is Indigenous. And I won't say much because I'm going to come back to that in a second. Is my 3-year-old grandson, just turned 3. It was in March. His birthday is February. Went to daycare and came home and asked his mother. He said, "Am I going to be taken away and have my hair cut off?" And my daughter said, "Well, what are you talking about?" And we were talking about residential schools. And he told his mother. And it was the same kid who also came. I said to him, on Easter, I said, "What did you learn about Christianity?" "Well, you don't eat and drink during the day for 30 days, and it's called Ramadan." I mean, it's complete replacement. And you know that. So the next one is race. they're looking at kids and going, the white kids are, in some cases they brought them up. There are schools where I was working where the white kids had to come to the front of the classroom. And so it's public shaming, but you know that. So I talked about 3 things so far. I'm going to mention 6. So I started with all the sex stuff, the gender stuff, the trans stuff, and I could go on if somebody wanted more examples. I talked about the indigenous stuff, land acknowledgement, stolen land. I objected to this stuff. I was objecting to land acknowledgements 4.5 years ago when people thought I was crazy. I ran twice, politically, for one reason, including with the PPC. Because the PPC is the only party in Canada that is reflective of what matters most to me, which is rights and freedoms. But I ran to walk out of the land acknowledgement. So I did that, and I had it filmed, and I put it on X, and that was years ago. And now it's a big issue because they're taking away people's homes all over British Columbia. And we can come back to that if you're interested. So the next one I want to talk to you is all of this. They're moving away from academic standards. They're even having equity marking. Principals are taking teachers aside and saying, I'm not happy with the mark you're giving your Aboriginal kids. And the teacher goes, I didn't even know I had any Indigenous kids in the classroom. You have 2, but they're both blonde with blue eyes. No, they get all the rights and all the things like that, and you need to treat them differently. And then, I make quips with people, principal said like that, thank you, but we really need ancestry kits first before we can teach these days. If we're teaching to the group, I need help here. And so this didn't, again, in my years, I had superintendents visit me in Surrey long before I went to Abbotsford for my last 2 years, because my wife and I, because of her sickness, we were going to move away from the city so we could knock off our mortgage and downsize to a lot of people. So when I went to Abbotsford, nobody really knew me, so I was really easy pickings. Because there weren't, if it was at my previous school, I had so many friends there and kids, it never would have happened to me. But, they would have tried nonetheless. In fact, I think some of this woke mafia that exists in all schools, I think if they could, I think they would have heard me. I mean, if they were good, that it's okay to torture people who commit wrong speech. I really think some of these people are so committed to their own moral superiority, because this is all, to me, it's just about people at the top wanting to pretend that they're better. In Orwell's 1984, you have the 15% of the population that's in the party, with Big Brother and so forth. And they have all the privileges, all the power, they do really well. And then there's about 85% of the people who don't have any power, and they do okay, but lots of bad things happen to them as well. And then Orwell makes the point that hope lies with the proles. It's the people at the top aren't going to change it, because the people at the top are happy. That's 15%. It's the same in a school. If you go into a school, there's 15%, or a school district, a better way of explaining it, 15% of the people who are department heads who already have more money and more power, and they're going to use it. They're going to get a better classroom. They're going to rat out a teacher who's not, who's off script. And then the principals and vice principals, and then there's all the people in the board office and stuff. That 15% do not want to lose it. My sister, who's a judge, is incredibly woke. And she says, I don't care about my 3 white sons. I don't care if they have miserable lives, because we deserve it. Because we've been so privileged as white people, particularly in our family, Jim, that, it's about time other people got the better jobs and so forth. She's part of the 15%. She's never going to lose anything. Even if she were to lose her job, she's got a fat pension already. She gets full pay as a judge, works half-time because she's superannuated. She's fine. It's just so easy for people like Carney to go around and be insensitive to the lives of ordinary people. We put people to work to put in a pipeline to whatever, but it just is not what he's interested in. Trudeau goes to one residential school, former residential school in Port. He went in on a horse. Chilcot. He went in on a black horse. I guess he couldn't find a white horse. But he wants this whole display that I am this sort of, Peter on a donkey type thing, or Jesus. And then true, another time, he had a teddy bear, maybe this interests a former prime minister, went to a cemetery, a known Catholic cemetery in Saskatchewan. You know the story. He got down on one knee, put his head down with his teddy bear. And, all the kids that were murdered there and stuff, they were Indigenous, and of course there probably wasn't any Indigenous child there, but there could be. But it's this pantomime, it's theater. The next thing I want to mention, the 506, is history. I think history is important because those who control the present can control the past, and let's control the past, control the future. I think it's really damn wrong if you change history. And Chris said something to you he thought was interesting in the car. I asked for feedback. It was a big mistake because Chris said, okay, I have a list here, Jim. And Chris was very supportive. He said, I really like the story about your dad. And so here's the story. My father in 1981 was part of repatriating the Constitution. And as you know, there was a problem getting the provinces to agree. In the end, they didn't get all 10 to sign. Quebec didn't. But they got enough for it to pass. And my father broke the impasse because he was personal friends with people of two different parties, Roy Rowland on the NDP, was Attorney General at the time in Saskatchewan, and Jean Chrétien, who was Attorney General at the time. Attorney General at the time for Canada. And they met, and they had a friendship, and they worked out a deal, and that's down in history. So it was the kitchen court, and I know it's down in history because it's in some of the textbooks before they removed all textbooks from social studies in schools. But my father's name when they're talking about the kitchen court, and it's just like one long sentence, and I can't even remember. I think one of them mentioned my dad's name, and the other one just said the Attorney General of Ontario. And they said that when things weren't looking good for Trudeau and his patriation, that three men got together from representing three different parties, different parts of Canada as well, representing English and French, and they came together and they over coffee, a lot of coffee, late at night, they came up with this agreement. And I went, what? My dad never drank anything, not even water after 5 o'clock at night. He drank scotch. Do you think my father, who drugged himself every night so he could sleep, sleeping pills and scotch, do you think he would ever drink coffee late at night? So I'd say to my students, no, this is what they do with history. This is what, there was one pope that went around with all the art in the Vatican, knocking off the private parts of the men in the sculptures, but so nobody in history would ever see that again. And that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing with my father, presenting my father as a coffee drinker. He was not a coffee drinker. And so it just shows you again with the 215 thing, the 215 matters because you can never erase that original sin. I'm going to come back to it in a second about what's happening in BC, and to me personally. But you can't unless you get it in 215. And so that's what I'm doing. But I'm also going after the 6 things I'm telling you. And the last one is the censoring of literature. And they're taking all the books that I love. And it kept me in school. In many ways, kept me in school. I don't know why, but I was really a lousy student. I was bored. I daydreamed a lot. But you put The Inheritors by William Golding in front of you. You put Holes, The Outsiders. I can read it again and again. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I mean, they're just the best of all to me. To Kill a Mockingbird. You put great literature in front of a lot of kids, and they just, particularly the girls, and all of a sudden they're just, they found something and they're growing and they're learning about other people in other lands, walking in people's footsteps, and these metaphors. It's a wonderful thing. And getting rid of that and bringing in social justice stuff, where the villain's always somebody who is younger but has these characteristics, And so you know how that goes. So I'm fighting a lot of different things in the school system. I'm not standing, everybody has abandoned me. Half my family, a lot of my friends, all my colleagues, they're not talking because they're afraid. You know, if I meet with them in the street, they say nicest things, but they say, I can't be associated with you. Complete abandonment by so many people. But I came to a point in my life where, again, I in those dark moments after being fired, I forged in those fires this person, and this person isn't special in any way, except for one thing: I've got guts. So you can come back to that again. I call it courage, yes, man. Sure, very courage, and so lots of things are happening, and it's extremely worrisome in schools. And I think the only way it's going to change is if we do something about it. You can't reason with these people because they think they're better than you are, as explained. You have to organize. You have to say to anybody who is saying any of these things that I'm talking about, that any of these things are going well, that you to do that. Now it's hard, and you don't want to lose friendships either. And teachers, there are teachers in the room here, you don't want to, or former teachers, you don't want to get yourself in trouble, I get that. So find ways of not ending up like I ended up. But we need to be bolder as a country. We need complete and utter resistance to this dark, dystopian, communist, destructive ideology. We call it wokeism. And so that's the gut parts of me. I'm on full throttle, and I'm going to accomplish something. I'm fighting my employer, I'm fighting my regulatory body, I'm fighting my union, I'm fighting the government, I'm fighting all sorts of things. I'm being told all the time, I'm going to get lawsuits against me, it hasn't happened. I get death threats, I get all sorts of things. And it doesn't change a thing. Because, and this is a legal thing, why, if you were, and parents, and I hope this never happens, were in a divorce, and they had to place you with your mother or your father, what would the judge do? What would he do? What would be the most important thing that the judge would do? What was right for you, or what was right for your mom or dad? I don't think so legally. What would a judge do? It's in the best interest of the child. The judge would just go and say, okay, thank you, I've heard you, yeah, I understand all these things and like that. You know, it's the child that matters. And that's what schools are set up to, it's the child that matters. So that's what I'm doing. And I'm seeing my grandsons being indoctrinated. My grandsons are spending whole days painting these rainbow stripes and the sidewalk and benches and all, at their school. I mean, they're just full on woke indoctrination. So again, maybe the end thing is just to highlight the guts thing. And again, I don't have any more guts than anybody else. It's just that I'm just that Joni Mitchell song. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. I have nothing left to lose. Everything that mattered to me was tied up outside of my family and friends, but it was tied up in my job. I got up in the morning and I came home late. There was never a day I got in my car at 3 o'clock. There was never a teacher who outworked me. I'm sure there are a lot of better teachers out there, but there was never a teacher who outworked me. I volunteered for everything. Every single year I taught, I put on special events for disabled kids. Nothing to do with my job. I did theater, I did music stuff, I did environmental stuff, I did coach. One year I coached 6 teams in 1 year, 6 high school teams in 1 year. I won provincial championships, city championships, doing all these things. I was a highly committed guy. And thank you. And so anyhow, I think it's a tremendous loss because I have a skill set. I'm not good. I can't go out and do a lot of things, but I can go into a classroom and do a good job. So I was with the 1BC people, with Dallas and Francis, and spent a long time with them. And Thursday they were organized, and I'm closing with this thing here. And then I'd like to have a couple of questions. On Thursday, I said, where are we meeting? I said, well, we'll tell you tomorrow morning at 10. Dallas. I can tell you, we'll tell you tomorrow morning at 10. It wasn't Dallas, she's not that way, she's just a really sweet woman. She said, I'm not supposed to tell you, and then somebody came in right away, because she's got all these handlers and security people. And then I learned at 10, and I'm driving and I get a call from Frances, and she said, where are we going? And I said, well, you know where we're going. You were told the Prestige did. And she said, no, that's being changed because we got kicked out. So as soon as 1BC, somebody at the hotel somehow heard that, even though we didn't know until 10, and the meeting was at 11, it was already the hotel said, we don't want you here. They called the police. This is 1BC. This is a party that already has 5% of the electorate supporting him. And I think in time it's going to go much higher. I think it's just mainstream values. Like the PPC, I think, I'm sort of hoping there's going to be growth, because I think it really is the mainstream party, federally. So we go to another hotel, the other side of Kamloops, and I dressed like this. I didn't have my coat, because we're going to be inside. And they closed the doors to us as well. We were already there, we were already parked, people were inside, and all of a sudden, bang, police called, and Dallas made the decision we're just going to do it outside, and it was freezing and windy, and I was just wearing these clothes here. Anyhow, we had to, this is a political party, there's 2 elected members of parliament of the provincial legislative assembly, and they're being banned everywhere they go publicly. So what do you think the reception was when these 3 wacko leaders of this anti-woke, anti-indoctrination movement and pro-historical truth and ending Indigenous essentialism or special rights or anything? An Indigenous person even Indigenous, has no more rights than anybody else, because no child in my classroom has more rights than some other child. It doesn't work that way with me. And it shouldn't work, and it's the same with all parents. All parents love all their kids equally. I know that. Doesn't mean you like all your kids equally or whatever, but you make that effort, because that's what you do. Those are the values that we grew up with, and they're not going to be taken away by these reified communists, these thugs, because they hurt people. So we go into TRU, and I think you'll like why we find this interesting. So we go in. I'm not a distinguished person at all, and I was fired, so the only reason I'm there, I was the guy who was, for years before, doing a one-man crusade on them. They're lying about residential schools, so they put me in. But these 2 people are something else. Frances Whittleson, oh my gosh, it's incredible what she's accomplished. And against such opposition, and Dallas Brody, wow, and talk about death threats that these 2 get. We had 6 security guards. At the protest at one point, someone knocked my sign on the ground, and I went to pick it up, and a big guy went and put his foot on like that, stepped, and I just said, it's my sign, I'd just like to pick it up. And the guy just kept just looking at me, and told me to something off, and kept my foot on it, so I just pushed him hard, and he fell back, and I picked up my sign, and then he ran right at me. And he was like this far away from me, and out of nowhere, this black shape just goes, one of the 6 security guards. Like, I mean, there's the potential. The Charlie Kirk moment follows those 2 women in particular. Because I'm particularly Dallas, because she's saying this stuff everywhere, and she's saying, get rid of, change the Constitution, get rid of the ending. I mean, just changing it all. Absolutely not. All Canadians equal value. That's what 1BC means. All Canadians are the same rights, same consideration, same respect, all this kind of stuff. So what I want to say here with this is they went in there, and there's all these people, and there are many more than the media said. The media said, 150 or something. There's many more than that, because kids went to class, kids came in. So I think there was 400 or 500 people, because there'd be a group here, and 20 minutes later, it was the same size group, but all different faces, with the exception of a few hardcore people who wanted to stay all the way through. And so there's lots of people. And Dallas goes out there and starts to speak, and there's no microphone, and there's people crowding around you like that. She's small. Both Frances and Dallas are short and thin, and with not very powerful voices. And we drowned out, and Frances tried to do one-on-one talk, and her street epistemology, and how she works. She's the intellectual. She wants to work on person in time and get them to understand the facts and so forth. None of that was working. So what did I do? I looked at this crowd of a lot of people, and I just walked around, and I walked right up to people, and I went up to them, and I went like this, and I said, "Why are you lying?" It was a professor. I said, "Why are you lying to students? I think what you're doing is unconscionable." I couldn't think of anything worse than lying to children. Why are you doing this? Why are you talking about something that you know is not true? You know that those kids weren't harmed. You know there was no murder. And then all of a sudden, all these people gravitating around me and shouting me out and surrounding me, and I just walked somewhere else, and I went back at them and talked to new people. And so that's where there were a lot of hits that day for me, over 1 million hits, because I was completely and possessed. I was this crazy person, which I maybe kind of are, and I am. But the crazy person that was not going to take no from anybody about anything, and I'm not. I'm going to walk out of any land acknowledged. I'm going to do anything that goes against my conscience. I'm going to do that for the rest of my life and over my dead body. I said to hundreds and hundreds of people, some really big people, all sorts of people, groups of people mocking me, people laughing at me, people calling me all sorts of names like that. They got it back. They got it back and more, but they got it back with reason. They got it facts. I stood my ground and went up to them, I followed them, and I said, "Show me the evidence." And then one clip that did really well was of a guy saying, "Why do you need evidence?" And that's such a statement about what university is becoming. Why should a university get any funding at all from the public if it's not getting kids to think better? It's getting kids to think like, to me, the most disreputable people in our society. The people who want to destroy it. Chris and I were talking about deconstructionism in the car up here. What is deconstructionism? Jim, what's your take on it? And I said, here's my best attempt. Chris, you're smarter than I am, but I'll give it a try. It's taking apart. It's saying everything that our ancestors built, including residential schools or any schools, everything that we're part of, even our language, everything about us, our religion, even the incredible accomplishments of the explorers and so forth. They're on somebody else's land, and we're still on their land. Everything about us is being deconstructed. So that's it. That's who I am. I'm just the teacher who was fired. That's it. People get fired. There's nothing interesting about that. Except that I'm fighting back. And I'm doing it, I know with some people in this room, because I have a sense there's probably some people in this room who follow me, or have, in some way or another, people may follow watching here, but there might be some people who have supported me in one way or the other already. I think that's what we need right now. I don't think we need to convince the other side. Because first of all, you can't convince people who are deluded and are fanatical and are doing for your same interests of the 15%, or people who want to be the 15%. They want to be better than you, and they want to take everything for you, including your land. And if you don't think that's serious, then come live where I live. Half of Tawasin is already owned by the local band. There's 400 people that own half of the town of Tawasin, which is where you get the ferries going to the island. And they want it all now. And the people in government, EB, the Premier, and the Prime Minister, they're all happy to give it away. And the people in Richmond, and I'm part of that as well. It's amazing talking to people there. And to hear them, and to talk to these people, and to watch them crying and saying, I went to the bank, and the bank's refusing to renew my mortgage. But when you hear people say that to you, and it's older people, these older people, they're going to fight. whole lives with the 85%. It's not going to be the people who are benefiting, the people who are fine. My sister's not going to worry if her land's taken away, her house is taken away. She'll buy another one somewhere else, and oh, look, you know, it's so good, look at me. I've always defended Indigenous people. It's us. Hope lies with us. And we need guts. We need courage. The courage of our convictions. Does anybody have any question?
Thank you, Jim. And just before we go to questions, I've got a mic here. And what we're going to do for our Q&A, I just brought your book up just so you can just show those online and where to go ahead.
Oh,
Look, you know,
well, that's very nice of you. It's a really it's my story. And people have offered me money in the last almost 5 years, and I've never taken a dime. And Chris knows I'm real about that, because Chris said he's going to pay for my hotel. And I told him in the car that I was going to pay for my hotel. I'm happy to be with you guys. This means something to me. It means that, you know, I've risen. I mean, I'm not ashes anymore. So my story is interesting because you see all the things that they did to me, and I don't think this should happen to any other teacher or employee. And so there's a few copies here that Chris probably has, and if you kindly, if I'm selling them for $20, or if Chris could give, there's a little bookmark that has the information. They can get it on Amazon, or you can just go to my website, jimmymcmurtry.com. But that helps me because selling the number of books that I've sold already helps my legitimacy. It helps scare my employer, my regulatory body, and my union. And the fun thing is, my union is the BCTF, the most woke, communistic, anti-white, anti-Christian, anti-everything union out there, I think. And they haven't abandoned me yet because they're scared of me, because they don't want to be sued. And when people support me by buying my book or reading my articles or following me on X, it makes me stronger and it makes them weaker. So thank you very much.
thank you, Jim. So we're going to have those books at the back and the bookmarks that he mentioned as well. So just an outline for our Q&A. Yes, you're going to be online. Don't feel nervous about it. You don't have to give your name, but I will come to you. If you just put your hand up, I will come to you. You're not going to be videotaped, but just like you know, there's about 300 watching, and they would probably love this opportunity to ask you questions. And I have some myself. So if you just would raise your hand, and I will come to you. And just before that, I want to just give you a little personal experience. Like I said, I'm from this area, and we just had our county councillors voted in. And we happened to have 4 in my division, so I hosted a forum. And I waited out of, questions, and I presented time for individuals to ask questions as well. And my final question I brought to our candidates was UNDRA. What is their understanding of UNDRA and what's their position? And I know that you're going to probably talk about this, but I just want to tell you what happened. There was some discussion, and that Tuesday, it was election day, and I went to cast my vote, and lo and behold, one of the constituents recognized me and came over and talked to me, and she said, "Bev, I'm so glad you asked that last question." She says, "I'm Native. Our band has a good chief. And I am so glad that discussion came up." So, when we discuss this with the Natives, that's what they like to be called, Natives. I learned this. And I have had experiences where Natives have told me their experience in these schools that their chiefs encouraged to have started. Some of the chiefs encouraged this. And they said if it wasn't for these residential schools, they would not have been educated. And this was a lawyer, a native lawyer that I was actually speaking with at the time. So, and they do also risk coming out and speaking good of their past because it doesn't fit the narrative. So, God help us just to be real. Help us to be bold. Help us to be truthful. So in that, I'm just going to go, I saw a hand, so I'm just going to go and get the question.
My question / comment relates to what Bev was talking about here. The dialogue, the discussion is so important. Is there a place online where people can see concise, frequently asked questions and answers that have resources to back them up? Because we know the what now. We just need to work on the how and have concise action plan.
Well, it's wonderful, and that's consistent with what I was saying. That I think we all know right now that there's an awful lot wrong with schools in our society, and we need to take action. Just one thing that Bev might find interesting was you mentioned UNDRIP. UNDRIP came in, I think it was 2 months after the 215. So without the 215, that falsehood, I don't think UNDRIP would have passed. And DRIPA wouldn't have passed in British Columbia. And both UNDRIP and DRIPA means really, and of course the Richmond-Cowichan decision, is that Indigenous title to all of Canada is senior to your title to your property. And so if that's the Canada people want, that's fine. Again, so would my dead body. Because I spent my life working with kids from other countries. When you're in a city like Surrey, the vast majority of the kids are immigrant. I mean, it's amazing from immigrant families. And I worked hard to make sure that they had the same rights, freedoms and privileges, whatever, as anybody else. So this idea that all of a sudden I'm going to stand by and lose it. So you asked, it's a big question as to what to do to find that. And maybe we could talk personally afterwards because I've got some suggestions. My particular focus at this time is my story. I think it's also because of all that happened in Kamloops. It's the 215 thing. And there are, I talk about that in my book quite a bit. I talk about the different organizations. I have reviews from Conrad Black and former judges and other people. So I try and address action plans. But right now all I would like to say is, and Bev repeated it, we need to be bolder.
When it comes to being bold, if you have one piece of information you give people if you're part of an organization that does land acknowledgements in order to make a case for not doing land acknowledgements anymore.
Yeah, I've been talking about this for the one person who's most critical about me and walking out of land acknowledgements, publicly filming it and putting it online, and to do it again during the provincial and federal elections. I got a lot of angry people with me, and it's a man who's a quadriplegic. He was the mayor of Vancouver, Sam Sullivan. I don't know if anyone knows who he is. But he's somebody who believes in preserving history, and we become friends. And he said, Jim, we shouldn't do land acknowledgements because they're repetitive, because they're false, because they're compelled speech, and on and on and on. But you don't want to be rude. Wouldn't it be better if you got up beside the person or asked if you could do your own land acknowledgement and say something different and have equal space? And I said, Sam, it doesn't work. In school, no kid's going to speak out or teach you because you're going to get in trouble. Because it comes down, it's just an order. One of the things that I mentioned is there's 8 professional standards for teachers in British Columbia. There was 8, and 2 years ago they brought in a 9th. And it's all about how you have to respect and commit yourself as a teacher to the healing of Indigenous people. Healing. Teachers now have to be therapists, shrinks, And then it said, your person, it's clear as, written down, do not allow personal opinions on anything to do with Indigenous people. This is our positions, including in residential schools. And then they list where you cannot have your own personal opinion. And it includes the staff room. Staff room is the only place left in high school where you dare open your mouth, because you look around and you go to the thought police. No, Bill's okay. Kareem's okay. Hey, what do you think about it? Anyhow, but I mean, you can't even do that now that it's law and policy and so forth. So I don't have a good answer for you now, outside of the fact that you need to resist. And whether that is just quietly writing to the principal or whatever, not principal in your case, but write to the organization or talk to somebody else, someone hiring you quietly, or get other people, talk to other people about it and say, maybe as a group we could approach and so forth. It's not for everybody. Some environments it's too dangerous, and some people don't have the character type. So I'm actually not needing people to go out and take risks. I'm asking people just to support those who are already out there doing that. And people here are doing that. You came out today. You're supporting me. You're making me feel bigger as a person. And so I'm sorry that's not the best answer. But
Any other question?
I guess a question and a statement. I just, as you listen to all this, and I follow you, Jim, and your inspiration. But one thing is I'm reminded of a quote, I'll probably ruin the last name, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. They lie to us. We know they lie to us. They know that we know they lie, and we know that they know that we know, and yet they still lie. And that's where we are today. This narrative. But my question would be regarding Bill C-254, which I think not enough people are aware of, that it's going to criminalize what you talk about. And I've written our government, the Premier and my MLA and the Indian Minister here, because you've been so terrific about putting together a list of those children that are supposed to be buried, that are buried elsewhere and died of something else. That's going to be a crime, and it's going to be a federal crime under Bill C-254 reintroduced. So everything you're doing and talking about here will be criminalized, and because it's a federal law, I think the provinces are going to need to do something, whether it's notwithstanding or something, to defend my right to even write the government about this. And I used your data. So I just wanted you to maybe add some color to that, to Bill C-254.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you for writing. I mean, you're taking action. We have to do that. Whatever that is, whatever we can do, we need to do it. When you talk about lies, in the Soviet Union, and the show trials, and it's still there in Russia today. You can't form a generation of children, fill their heads with lies and think it's not going to affect generations afterwards. There's so many people that tune today, well, they say things that are just incredible. I go, well, why would you ever think that? Well, it's such as the grave thing, and I see the kids, this is why I got fired, it's about the graves things. And they said, yeah, what about it? Well, there weren't graves. Really? I mean, it is common. It's just so much of that. So the just ending my remarkable response, thank you so much, is Francis Whittleson, just talking about boldness. So we meet at the Home Harbor. We meet up there a mile away. We're supposed to meet somewhere else, but protesters are going to be there. They're worried. They changed the Home Harbor. We're outside for an hour and a half, just freezing. And then we walk it seemed like a kilometer anyway, right to where we're going to go, right into this one place, Student Street. Now, Hardin TRU. Francis is in the lead. Dallas is right beside her. And I'm behind them. I want these two, the more public people. They said, come be with us, Jim. And I said, okay, I like to walk a little behind. And we get up to there, and I said, because it's my nature, I said, let's go inside. I said, well, we're just going to be outside. And I said, we should go inside. And And the other two said, sure. So we started going to the door. And again, we had a lot of people, including some security guys, as I said, Andrea Humphrey and some other people with relatives with their cameras. And Frances, again, is, she's small. And she's coming, she's wearing this billboard crest. And they only send a one person. There was almost no Indigenous people there because the university very clearly asked them not to come because they didn't want what happened in Winnipeg. They thought the best thing to do was make it a non-event, have nobody notice us. So they asked. So there's almost no Indigenous. I didn't see a single Indigenous person except for possibly two older people. But a lot of them weren't shirts. The people came up, but they were told not to. They just wanted it to be a complete non-event, no one show up. So Frances, opened the door, Frances, she starts to walk in, and right away a guy walks out, an administrator, and he said, "That's who I am right now." And he said, "I'm asking you to leave. You cannot come inside. You can't be here. I'm asking you to leave. This is private property." And Frances looks at him and she says, "I'm not going to leave." And then he pulls out a piece of paper and he said, "Well, you've come here before. We served you with these trespassing papers. And so second time, what's going to happen to you, which is the police can be called." And Frances already told me that she was prepared to be arrested. And she said, "Jim, are you prepared to be arrested?" And I said, "I'd like not to be. It'd be better if I weren't. But if you're being arrested, I don't want to miss out." And he said to her again, "Frances, I'm asking you to leave." And she said once again, "I'm not leaving." And he said, "I'm asking you right now to move away a little bit because you're blocking the entrance." She said, "I'll do that." And she moved about 15 feet, and then the crowd moved away from the door and the main student area. And he said, "Thank you, but I'd like you further away." And Frances said, I'm good here." They didn't call the police because that's not what TRU wanted. That would have attracted a bigger crowd. She stood her ground. We all stood our ground. And again, what you were saying about all the lies, people went along with it. Everybody, the whole society went along with all the lies that they also had Chris and I were talking about the Cultural Revolution, and got into that. But from 1966 to 1976 in China, they completely turned society around. They killed all the, as you told me, the four olds, the traditions, and all the old things, all the old values, like we're doing here. Get rid of Western values, Enlightenment values, Christian values, just sweep it on literary values. You get rid of academic, just get rid of it all. Anything to do with Europeans. And so it's absolutely fascinating how people can become so easily herd-like. And it's hard to break. And in 1984, the protagonist, Winston Smith, in the end, he's broken. He's broken. And maybe that's the message more, is it's not that we're all going to be broken, we're not. You watch, I'm telling you, all schools are going to change in a very fundamental way. But we've got a fight on our hands.
We've got room for time for another question. Yeah, one last question here.
Yeah, I believe you knew Mark Carney's father personally, is that true? A lot of us know that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, is, I believe, an evil man who's very deluded. But how do you think he got to that stage? I think that's probably a parallel for a lot of the professors and educated people who are now educating the kids. Like Mark Carney's father, I believe, was head of the school in Fort Smith, and coming from a conservative point where his father was at, how do we get the next generation to this deluded point? Was it the universities, and how do you see that progression?
Yeah, I think Mark Carney's success is he became part of the 15% and part of the 1%, and then, you know, part of the international elite. I think it'd be hard to have much of a conversation with Mark Carney about Canada, because I don't think he knows Canada. He certainly doesn't know ordinary Canadians. And he did something to me which is a cardinal sin. He was only responding once about the residential school thing about Indigenous people. And they wanted to hit him on the fact that his father never said anything bad about residential schools. Never. And that's why this idea that they're bad, I never heard it until 6, 7, 8 years ago. All of a sudden, the zeitgeist comes in, all of a sudden people are saying things that, as I said at the beginning, complete opposite from the truth. Mark Carney's father was a gentleman above everything else. He did not. He was so wonderful with the students. He was somebody who saw himself as a man of the people, and I'm sure was a lovely father for Mark. So during the campaign, maybe you noticed there was just one time that Mark was asked and responded to it, and he turned around. Does anyone tell me who it was? I love my father, but those are not my views. No, I love my father, and I didn't agree with every view of my father. That's normal. Do you think I'm going to tell other people that? Absolutely not. I mean, there's something wrong there. There's something wrong with so many of our leaders. So again, hope lies with the pros, with us. And I think we're going to succeed. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Jim. And
Well, there you have it. That was the entire speech that Jim gave at the Morningside Hall in Alberta a few days ago. So, yeah, I apologize again. The sound, I thought the sound was going to be a little bit better. It wasn't that great, a little bit echoey, but I think that you pretty much got the gist of what Jim's talking about. We're going to get into it a little deeper tomorrow night with better sound for sure, and give you some more stuff to think about. In the meantime, I have a lot of work to do, because the response that I'm seeing right now from the NDP, the Liberals, all of the woke people in response to our Alberta government actually taking steps to protect children, their response is absolutely expected, but it's completely ridiculous. And I got to get to work shredding that a little bit, because our government's doing some good things, and we need to support them. We need to stand with them and let them know that we appreciate the efforts they're taking to turn this province around. So if you haven't yet, send your MLA an email. Say thank you, MLA whoever, for standing up for Alberta. Thank you for using the notwithstanding clause on these things so that the federal government and the Supreme Court can keep their fingers out of Alberta's business. Thank you very much, and please use the notwithstanding clause on every single federal law, just like Quebec did, because Albertans can manage our own affairs. We don't need Daddy Ottawa to do it for us anymore. Catch you later. Meow. There is no such thing as a trans kid. Only kids that woke activists want to sacrifice in order to promote their agendas.